Hi there and welcome. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a video on Frostfire, but doing it in a bit more depth, the whole book, and just talking about a little bit of the inspirations for it and a few of the little tidbits of lore, that kind of thing. Uh, the reason that I wrote that in the first place, back when I was completely unpublished, had no contract, no agent, that sort of thing, I actually I was told about a competition for it, and the publisher ran that, and it proved to be a very good investment because despite coming second, it managed to be good enough to get a contract for that. The idea itself was something that I'd had for a little while but never developed, and it had come when I was brainstorming a bunch of fantasy ideas to go in a single shared world, which is where all my fantasy books are set. It's a place called the Infinite Sea, a vast plain of water stretching out as far as anyone can tell forever. And upon this plain of water lie continents that float there, that are formed from stars crashing into it and forming together with great leviathans that come up from the depths. And these places are filled with magical power that these beings that have formed together into places for people to live, that these beings can transfer to the humans in various different ways. Each continent have got their own kind of way of living. On and the continent that Frostfire is set on, Adarast, the power comes through the form of a magical glacier where pieces of it can be cut and bonded with, and that power can be used to form objects, shields and armor and weapons if you need it, but more just as much likely like small animals that you could talk to and that kind of thing. The pieces of this glacier are sentient enough to be able to talk to the person that they're bonded with, and they are able to give lots of advice that no one else can easily do. There's a few hints here and there of what the extended world of the Infinite Sea. I believe that the metals that could be special are mentioned in it, which is a thing in most of the places where magical objects can be formed from metal mined out of the land. The key part of this, though, that really got me going with the idea was the idea of a little icy creature, like a lion or something, just sitting in the palm of someone's hand and talking to them. A bit like the demons in Philip Pullman's work. As with lots of good fantasy, you only need a little seed in order to build the rest of the world around it. And that was the thing that started me going. From there, it was just about finding where that was going to be set. Like, well, if there was some kind of magical ice, where would that be easily found? What would be a good place to have that set? And I've thought about mountains, like places like Antarctica as well. But mountains seem like a good bet because you got so much scope for adventure and pitfalls and danger, that kind of thing. I also wanted to avoid the standards kind of medieval forested world. We've seen that so often. Like there's Lord of the Rings has spawned so many clones of it that love to have that kind of world, which can be fun. But I just want to see something different. I want to write something different, and so I pitched this world that was more in the vein of a kind of Tibet, that kind of area. From that thought, it was fairly easy to start building out the culture of the people that were going to live there. Things like the red prayer flags that represent people that have died out on the mountain, and the clerics and things like that. All you have to do is kind of ask questions about, well, if there is a magical glacier, then what kind of things is that going to inspire in a culture? What are they going to believe about it? What are they going to want to do with it? Are they going to worship it? Are they going to be afraid of it? And that would depend on how you wanted your story to go. But in this case, the main people in it find the glacier and the mountain that it comes from to be a kind of god, which isn't strictly accurate, but it's close enough for the purposes of the book. Once that kind of world was in place, then I started thinking about what would the main narrative be and what would the main character be. And I picked out some names, which Sabira was the main character I went with in the end, and that was one of them. And I had to think about who was going to have the most interesting story in this place, whose tale was going to hit all of these points to do with the glacier. and the magics and the abilities that kind of conferred on people. That led to the kind of concept of the bonding and the pilgrimage up the mountain for people that have been chosen to bond a frost sliver when they got to the right age group. Following on from that, it was like, well, how can it go wrong? And on a mountain, an avalanche seems like the best way to break things up. And if you've read the book, then you know that it only gets worse for her from there. While I do think that it's worth being careful in content in a children's book, I also don't want to coddle people too much. I want to make sure that things can, the real world can be a dangerous place, and it's good to show that in books as well on occasion. The actual writing of Frostfire took me about a 3-month period, I think, to get the first draft out, and then edit that down a little bit so it was ready for the competition. At that point, it was about 80,000 words. Which is a lot longer than what it ended up being, which is definitely a good thing that it got it edited down. My excellent editor, Kezia Lupo, who's got a book of her own coming out now, in fact, by the name of We Are Blood and Thunder. She has identified a lot of the right things to do with it, including cutting it down from 80,000 words to 55,000. Most of those edits were simply removing duplicate perils, things where environmental challenges that Sabira had to get through that weren't really pushing the story on. It was a peril, but well, you kind of knew that she was going to get through it because otherwise there wouldn't have been any story afterwards. Some things we kind of just combined, and other things we removed entirely or just cut down to only a few sentences. We also changed the structure about quite a bit. Originally, the flashbacks were spread throughout the story at key moments, but it was decided that we would move those all towards the beginning to make it a bit clearer, a bit easier to understand for a younger audience. Possibly of note, Sabira used to have an extra couple of siblings, but though they added a bit of colour here and there, a bit of comedy now and then, they were not really important to the plot, so they ended up falling by the wayside. Despite all those edits, the main story, I think, pretty much survived intact from the beginning. The start of the book and the end of the book remain pretty much the same. It's just all so much tighter, so much better after someone has gone through it. If you're a writer and you can find somebody that can give you good feedback to your work, it is the best tool you can possibly find, because you'll never spot all the problems with it yourself. If you're the one writing it, you just don't notice when it's something that you've done that's a mistake quite often. At one point, we were going to include epigraphs, little quotes and things for each of the parts in the book, which were kind of interesting, but they didn't really fit. They didn't really add that much. But they did add like nice little pieces of lore about the past and how people had previously gone down into the mountain and fought some kind of evil that's caused a lot of problems. And if you read the whole book, you'll perhaps be able to guess some of that. Again, that's something that links to the wider Infinite Sea, if I get that far in books. Hopefully I will. One of the quite subtle changes, but important, was messing around with the voice, the kind of words that the Frost Sliver would use to talk to Sabira. Before, it was a bit more stern, bit more just kind of taciturn, which kind of felt normal for something that was icy or like almost like an AI or something. But we ended up pushing it in a slightly different direction, with it being a bit more snarky, adding a bit more comic relief, which really helps because at times the story can be quite all the harsh conditions, the dangers that she's passing through. It needs a little bit of relief now and then. Hopefully you've enjoyed that little look behind the scenes. I had found a few of these bits of information kind of interesting. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to tell me about them, and I'll see if I can get to them at some point in another video perhaps. And well, thank you for listening, and look forward to more stuff soon. See you.